As promised, part 2 of Weird NASCAR Rumors 2002 has arrived. Leading off today, let's talk about the 25 car for Hendrick Motorsports. Jerry Nadeau and the 25 team got off to a horrible start to the year, and by mid-April, crew chief Tony Furr had decided to leave to seek out other opportunities. Less than a month later, Nadeau would be departing as well, with Joe Nemechek replacing him. And while this may have been the end of Nadeau's part in this story, we are going to be circling back around to him later in the video. Nemechek was tapped to drive for the rest of the season, but his spot was not guaranteed past that. Less than 2 weeks after Front Row Joe got the ride, it was rumored that Ward Burton would be replacing him the following season. Burton was coming off a win in the Daytona 500, so you could say that his stock was fairly high, and it was reported that Dodge executives were actually worried about losing him to Hendrick. But Burton, among the most loyal men in the garage area, quickly stated that he would be staying with Bill Davis Racing and the Caterpillar Dodge for years to come. As the summer went on, the 25 team continued to struggle, despite the driver and crew chief changes, and Joe Nemechek only scored one top 20 finish in his first 8 races with the team. In late July, it was reported that Nemechek would not be returning in 2003. Around this time, a new name emerged as a potential candidate to drive the car the next season: Steve Park, who hadn't yet re-signed with Dale Earnhardt Incorporated and whose seat was anything but safe at that point. It's not clear if there was actually any substance to this rumor, and I'd kind of be surprised if there really was. While he was coming back from an injury, Park's performance had been so bad at that point that DEI was actually talking about releasing him. Things settled down for a while, but a month later, Rick Hendrick stated that he had a short list of drivers, and even though he didn't offer any names, the most interesting candidate quickly emerged: Sam Hornish Jr. If you haven't watched my last video, I teased this when I talked about Hornish to DEI rumors, but soon after capturing his second IndyCar title at just 23 years old, he was suddenly a serious candidate to drive the 25 car. He even visited Hendrick Motorsports' shop in September. He downplayed the significance of this visit, just saying that he was offered the chance to see how the operation worked. He had previously implied that he really wanted to win the Indy 500 before making a move to NASCAR, and in the end, he would make the move to NASCAR full-time in 2008 after winning the Indy 500 in 2006. Leaving the IRL as a 3-time champion and Indy 500 winner before reaching the age of 30. Some other names that got thrown around for the 25 car were Scott Riggs, Ron Hornaday, Bobby Labonte, though that didn't seem to be anything more than a wild rumor, Ken Schrader, who had previously driven the car, and Casey Mears, who would go on to drive the car in 2007. In the end, Nemechek would re-sign for the 2003 season, but not until mid-November. I think that Nemechek was probably the safest option, and he would win one race in the 25 car in 2003, but he would finish 25th in points and leave at the end of the season. I think that Sam Hornish Jr. would have been the most interesting choice, and I could see him doing really well. Hornish is remembered for having a pretty lackluster NASCAR Cup Series career, but when he came over to NASCAR with Team Penske, they weren't exactly the Team Penske that we know today. Had he gotten a ride with Hendrick, he would have been in much better equipment, and I could see him being a lot more successful. But with that said, I really respect him for wanting to win an Indy 500 before making the move to NASCAR. So another story that I teased in the last video was the drama surrounding Jimmy Spencer in the 41 car. It seems like I can't make it through a video without talking about some kind of drama surrounding a Ganassi car. Jimmy Spencer's time in the 41 car is mostly remembered for his constant run-ins with Kurt Busch, which made for one of the better rivalries of the last 25 years. But when you look at the performance of that team in 2002, it was terrible. The year started with failing to qualify for the Daytona 500, and despite a handful of solid finishes, the team utterly lacked consistency. The rumors about Mr. Excitement's seat being in jeopardy would start in July as Ganassi looked to sign Ricky Rudd, and it was unclear whether Rudd would be driving a third Ganassi car or replacing Spencer. For more on the Ganassi-Ricky Rudd saga, check out episode 13 of Weird NASCAR Rumors. A link to the playlist is in the description. Big red flag for Spencer's job security presented itself in August when road course ace Scott Pruitt took over the 41 car for the weekend at Watkins Glen, and Jimmy Spencer failed to qualify in a third car for Ganassi. At this point, supposed insiders claimed that Ganassi had told Spencer that his ride was safe, but when Ganassi spoke on the topic a couple of weeks later, it wasn't definitely, but most likely, that Spencer would be back. It was at this point that Ganassi met with Bobby Hamilton. Hamilton was driving Chevys for Andy Petree Racing, but the Truck Series team he owned ran Dodges. If he wanted to continue racing in the Cup Series, he needed to make a move to a Dodge team, which Ganassi was. Jerry Nadeau, making his second but not final appearance in this video, threw his hat in the ring for the 41 car, even saying that he would be willing to forfeit his pay if he failed to meet expectations. John Andretti and Jason Leffler were also names that were thrown around as possible candidates. Things started to cool off for a little while, but then at the start of November, all hell broke loose with this ride. On November 5th, it was announced that Spencer would be shown the door following the 2002 season. Jimmy Spencer was understandably upset, stating that the news was shocking and it was not a mutual decision. Rumors about who would replace him immediately began to swirl, with Bobby Hamilton's name re-emerging along with Scott Riggs, Scott Pruitt, Max Pappas, Casey Mears, Dave Blaney, Todd Bodine, John Andretti, Scott Wimmer, and Hank Parker Jr. But the most interesting name that was talked about was Jimmy Vasser. Vasser had won the 1996 kart title with Ganassi and had actually been talked about for this same ride 2 years earlier. Check out Weird NASCAR Rumors episode 12, which covers the 2000 season, for more on that. Vasser threw cold water on the idea almost immediately, stating that he didn't think that he was actually being considered for the ride, but it would have been an interesting fit. The future of the team would remain unknown until December, when Casey Mears would be announced as the driver of the 41 car. I've talked about how much I wish that Ganassi had been able to put Jamie McMurray in this car and Ricky Rudd in the 42, as well as why I think Casey Mears was the wrong choice, or really the right driver at the wrong time for this ride, pretty extensively in previous videos, so check out episodes 13 and 15 for more on that. So, in order to not be redundant, I'll say that I kind of wish Dave Blaney had gotten a chance at this ride. The father of Ryan Blaney was a journeyman throughout his NASCAR career, and was never really given a shot in the sort of equipment that early 2000s Chip Ganassi racing had to offer. If he had gotten that shot, I could see him winning a race or two. The next thing I'm going to talk about is in 2002, we were in the midst of a time when a lot of open-wheel drivers had their eyes on NASCAR. We've talked about Sam Hornish Jr. already in this video. We've talked about Kenny Brack in the last video, Sebastian Bourdais twice, all the way back in episode 1 and again in episode 6, along with James Hinchcliffe and others along the way. But now we're going to talk about a NASCAR driver who was thinking about making the move to IndyCar. Jerry Nadeau, I told you he was coming back around, had his name linked to an IRL ride after his near victory driving the 44 car for Petty Enterprises at Sonoma. This move would have made sense, as Nadeau did have a history competing in open-wheel cars in the Formula Ford Festival and the Barber Pro Series. Also, the team that he was connected to was the Kelly Racing Delphi Automotive team. Delphi Automotive, as in the same Delphi Automotive that sponsored him in the 25 car that he had been released from earlier that year. So at least it seems like he hadn't been burning bridges with sponsors. Nadeau will forever be one of the biggest what-if stories of the early 2000s, as his racing career would come to an end less than a year later in a practice crash at Richmond. And I can't help but wonder, if he had made the move to IndyCar, would his story continue through 2003 and beyond? And what kind of success would he have enjoyed? Rumored to be coming the other way from open-wheel to NASCAR was Paul Tracy. Actually, Paul Tracy has made some previous appearances in this series in episodes 7 and 9. Barry Green, who owned the team Paul Tracy raced for in kart, was set to make the jump from kart to the IRL in 2003, and Tracy didn't seem to be keen on going with him. Tracy said that he was a road racer, and if he was going to be forced to race on ovals, then he wanted to go where he had the best chance of prospering, and there was more opportunity in NASCAR. He had been approached by Richard Childress, who wanted to set up a test session for him, and there were conflicting reports in July that Kyle Petty had personally flown to Cleveland to meet with Tracy about the possibility of coming to drive for Petty Enterprises. Eventually, Tracy would run 6 Busch, soon to be O'Reilly Auto Parts Series races in 2006, and 1 Truck Series race in 2008. But we would never see him in the Cup Series. Okay, let's wrap up with some rapid fire. There was a brief rumor that Robert Yates Racing was pursuing Kevin Harvick, because Kevin Harvick rumors seemed to be a constant thing in the early 2000s. Ken Schrader was rumored to be going to Petty Enterprises. Obviously, Petty was not a team that would be regularly competing for wins at this time, but I think Schrader would have been better off there than he was where he eventually landed at BAM Racing. So I wish that had happened. And finally, the Wood brothers had quite a long list of candidates to replace Elliott Sadler in the 21 car before Ricky Rudd, including Bobby Hamilton, Johnny Benson, Mike Wallace, Jason Keller, and Jerry Nadeau. And with that, Jerry Nadeau becomes the first driver to ever be featured in every single segment of a Weird NASCAR Rumors video. And with that, I'll wrap things up for today. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. And as always, leave a comment to discuss your thoughts on these rumors or any others that I may have missed. Have a great day.